My name is Nora. I'm 26 years old. If there's one thing that sets me apart from the rest of the Sanderson family, it's that I know when to stay silent. And that's exactly why they thought I was easy to control. I grew up in a mansion, over 4,000 square feet in the suburbs of Santa Barbara, with red clay tiles, a French rose garden, and walls polished like mirrors. I should have felt lucky, but those walls didn't reflect love. Only favoritism and a coldness that stretched through my childhood. My parents, Gregory and Eleanor Sanderson, were the kind of social icons business magazines loved to put on their covers. They donated to the arts, hosted charity galas, and flashed dazzling smiles at the cameras. But behind closed doors, where no lens could reach, lived a truth. Their eldest daughter, Claire, was the only one worthy of being loved. Claire is 3 years older than me. They used to call her the pride of the Sanderson legacy. She got a brand new Porsche on her sweet 16 while I got a box of chocolate from a local shop. When she failed 3 college interviews in a row, my parents hired a whole consulting team to rebrand her academic image. When I got a full-ride scholarship to Northwestern, Dad gave a distracted nod without looking up from his iPad. Mom simply said, "Keep it to yourself. No need to make Claire feel bad." Claire knew her place and wielded it like an invisible whip. She'd take my things without asking, invite my friends to her parties and tell them I was too busy to come. Once, she stole the college essay I had spent 3 months writing, submitted it as her own, and I had to rewrite everything in a single night. When I protested, my mother merely whispered, "Claire's more sensitive than you. Learn to understand her, not blame her." I used to wonder if I was exaggerating, until the one person who truly saw me, my grandfather, told me otherwise. My grandfather Walter didn't belong to my parents' glossy world. Despite being the founder of the international hotel chain our family lived off, he chose to reside in a 3-story wooden cottage behind the main house, filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a fireplace that never went out. "Real wealth isn't measured by shares," he once told me after I failed a financial exam, "but by how you get back up after being knocked down." I still remember those fall afternoons, sitting in his study learning how to read financial reports while Claire watched reality shows inside the main house. He guided me line by line. No shortcuts, no baby talk. If I didn't get it, he repeated it with patience, never raising his voice. "You've seen both the light and the dark side of inheritance," he said when I'd turned 20. "That's why you're the one who should hold it all someday." I smiled then, thinking he just loved his quiet granddaughter too much. I didn't realize it was a warning of the storm to come. Because even if I didn't know when, I knew my parents and Claire would make their move. And when they did, it wouldn't be words they used, it'd be reputation, power, and bloodlines. Just like they always had when someone outside the circle dared to reach for something off limits. Grandpa Walter passed away on a gray Monday morning, 3 days after I got back from a work trip to Chicago. The message from his private physician was only 6 words. He passed peacefully in his sleep. I froze by the office window, phone still in hand, as if the world outside had been vacuumed of sound. No tears came, only a silence so complete it felt like grief had swallowed the air. Not because I wasn't grieving, but because the part of me that hurt most had already shattered weeks ago. When he whispered, "Nora, if anything happens, find the old watch in the filing cabinet. Everything you need is there." I hadn't understood then, only sensed the urgency in his eyes, weightier than any board meeting he'd ever led. The funeral felt like theater. Black dresses, white leather chairs, imported macaroons, and endless camera flashes from social pages. Claire wore Ralph Lauren, crying on cue, smiling with precision. My mother clutched a Chanel purse, bowing her head for exactly 2 seconds when offered condolences. I kept my distance, eyes fixed on the only man who ever called me the true heir, as he was laid to rest among strangers who never truly saw him. A week later, Grandpa's personal lawyer, Ellen Graves, invited us to her office to read the will. 14th floor, overlooking the Santa Barbara coast. A thick leather file sat on the table, labeled in gold. W. Sanderson. Last Will and Testament. I sat between Claire and my mother. My father stood behind, arms crossed, like he was preparing to bid on a corporate merger. No one spoke, as Ellen began. Mr. Walter Sanderson bequeaths the controlling shares of Blue Horizon Hotels, equivalent to 78% market value, to his granddaughter Nora Sanderson. The room lost all air. She is also to inherit the full deed to the Riviera estate, including all auxiliary properties and a $3 million maintenance account. I didn't catch the rest. My ears rang. Next to me, Claire tilted her head, her stunned expression darkening within seconds. "Mom," she whispered, trembling. "What the hell is happening?" Ellen kept reading. Claire would receive a trust fund of about $500,000, distributed based on academic and behavioral milestones. My parents? A few personal keepsakes, and deep gratitude for continuing the family tradition. No investment accounts, no shares. I turned in time to see Dad's face flush crimson. Mom gripped the chair armrest, her red nails leaving dents. Claire stood abruptly, shoving her chair back so hard it hit the wall. "This can't be real. This is a joke, right?" Ellen remained calm. "All of this is verified, notarized, and supported by a personal video message from Mr. Walter explaining his decision. You're welcome to view it." I looked at my parents. They said nothing, but I recognized the exact moment their shock turned into strategy. That afternoon, I returned to the mansion, now legally mine, while Claire got into her car without glancing back. My mother called me 3 times that night, only to ask one question. "Are you sure you want to keep all of it? We could rearrange things more reasonably." I didn't reply, but I knew in my bones the game had begun. The next day, the security cameras were offline for 3 hours. My grandfather's office computer had been accessed, the safe had been rifled through. Then me, barely 48 hours into inheriting everything, already understood I was living in a gilded cage, where my parents would destroy anything to preserve their polished image. There was only one thing left for me to do: find the old watch my grandfather once mentioned. The key to surviving my own family. In the early days after the will was read, the Riviera Hill estate was no longer the home my grandfather cherished. It became a silent theater with 3 private acts playing out simultaneously. My mother glued to the phone in the dining room, my father locking his office from dawn till dusk, and Claire transformed into a suddenly devoted angel, brewing tea for Mom, asking Dad about the upcoming board meeting, and slicing me open with every ice-cold glance. The atmosphere shifted in a way that made my skin crawl. The staff, once warm, now avoided eye contact. Doors that were always open between rooms started locking. The Wi-Fi in my workspace kept cutting out for no clear reason. One morning, I found the file cabinet in my grandfather's study wide open. Documents once neatly arranged were scattered like they'd been ransacked. My heart pounded. No one on staff admitted to touching anything. I began to understand that things were quietly slipping from my hands. Every report, every note, every link to my inheritance. When I asked my father about it, he shrugged. "Gregory needed some files to audit the estate. You should relax, Nora. This is bigger than you can handle." "Bigger than I can handle?" I repeated, my voice low. Mom stepped in like she'd been waiting for her cue. "Sweetheart, I think all of this might be overwhelming you. I've already scheduled a session with Dr. Sanders, a trusted psychiatrist. I believe you need someone outside the family to talk to." I stared at her. "You think I'm mentally unstable?" "No, not exactly," she said, placing a hand on her chest like she was deeply moved. "It's just, your behavior has been very erratic. The insomnia, the suspicion, checking on everything constantly. Those are signs of being under too much stress." I walked out of the room without another word. That night, I locked my bedroom door and flipped through my private folder. A few pages were gone, A critical Excel spreadsheet I'd printed from my grandfather's financial system was missing. A chill ran down my spine. They weren't just trying to contest the will. They were building a case, painting me as unstable, fragile, incompetent, just enough to erase me from everything. I called Ethan Michaels, the son of my grandfather's closest friend, now an estate attorney in San Diego. "We need to meet," I said, my voice dry as paper. "And I need full confidentiality." 3 days later, I drove to Ethan's office with 2 hard drives and a stack of copies. I'd spent the night before scanning old emails, printing financial reports from before my grandfather died, and pulling all transaction logs from his computer I had access to. Ethan flipped through the documents like he was reading a crime novel. "This is more than just a family dispute," he said after nearly an hour of silence. "If they're trying to fabricate psychological instability, the first thing you need to do is get a mental health evaluation. On your terms. Don't let them control the narrative, and absolutely do not use any doctor they send you to." I gave no verbal reply, only a sharp inhale as the weight of it all locked into place. The game had changed, and the only armor I had left was clarity of mind. Back at the estate, something strange happened. The family photo album on the shelf was gone. The frame my grandfather kept on his desk had vanished. Claire was standing in the hallway, smiling like fog. "What did you do with Grandpa's pictures?" I asked, my tone sharp. She shrugged. "I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe the housekeeper put them away, old outdated stuff." I walked past her, but my mind was clear. They were erasing him from the very house he built, and if I did nothing, I'd be next. Matt curled up by the curb, coat-soaked, torn suitcase beside me like the corpse of a fallen soldier. Rain hadn't stopped, and I had no home to return to. When my phone rang, my hands trembled from the cold as I fumbled to answer. "Who did this to you?" Ashley's voice blared from the speaker, full of panic. "My family," I rasped. They kicked me out." "Stay right there, I'm coming." 20 minutes later, Ashley's silver Civic pulled up. She stepped out and wrapped me in a hug without asking anything. We didn't speak during the entire drive to her small apartment in East Santa Monica. Only after I'd showered, changed into a dry sweater, and sat on her couch with a hot cocoa in hand could I finally talk. She didn't ask much, just listened, nodding at times like she was fighting the urge to scream. "You can stay here for a few days," she said softly. "But it's small, and the landlord's strict about long-term guests." "A few days is enough," I lied. At that moment, I had no plan, only a void named despair. 3 days later, as I started applying for jobs everywhere, from law firms to local coffee shops, I noticed something odd. Interviews began well. They liked my resume, my degrees, my skills. But 1 or 2 days later, the same email every time. "We regret to inform you." At first I thought it was bad luck, but by the 5th rejection, I knew something was off. A young hiring manager in Culver City pulled me aside after an interview, lowering his voice, like he didn't want anyone to hear. "I don't know who you upset, but a man called our board with a warning." His name was Gregory Parks. Gregory, the family's attorney, my parents' loyal enforcer. I walked out of the building with clenched fists, shame burning in my chest. They weren't just taking the house, they were taking my reputation. Every opportunity, every door. That night, Ashley came home looking visibly uneasy. "Nora, there's something you need to know. My landlord got an anonymous call. They said I was harboring someone being sued for forging a will. You know how strict the lease rules are." "I'm sorry," she said, her eyes glossy. "If it were just you and me, I wouldn't care. But the whole floor is being watched. They're threatening to raise my rent or refuse to renew the lease." "I understand," I said, forcing a smile. "Don't worry. I'll be gone by tomorrow night." The next day, I stuffed everything I had into a backpack and an old suitcase. My personal account had just over $200 left over from my last internship before my grandfather passed. My credit cards? All were supplemental cards from the family's accounts, canceled last week. I rented a low-cost motel room near the I-10 freeway in a neighborhood I'd never even set foot in. The room smelled damp, the AC groaned, and the walls were stained with old watermarks, but at least it had a door I could lock from the inside. To stretch my funds, I sold my laptop, the last valuable thing I owned. The pawnshop owner gave me $200, a quarter of its real value. I didn't haggle. I needed the cash to survive a few more days. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed, the dim light casting shadows on the cracked mirror in the bathroom. I opened my wallet, instinctively counting what I had left. $185 and some coins. I looked around the room. Nothing here was mine. No grandfather, no friends, no chance left to prove I deserved what he had entrusted to me. I pulled out the scratched silver pocket watch I had hurriedly packed while being thrown out. The glass was worn, but the engraving on the back was still visible. When they doubt you, anchor deeper. I broke down, sobbing, for the first time, through everything. And then I made a vow. I would not let the tide drown me. I couldn't sleep that night. The hiss of old pipes, the flickering neon from the empty street, and the chemical scent of bleach mixed with despair all made it hard to breathe. I opened the pocket watch my grandfather had always carried, the only thing I had left from the ruins I called a life. I traced the engraved edge under the dim light. Then I noticed something. A fine groove around the back edge, nearly invisible. Suddenly I remembered him once saying, "If you ever need to find what I couldn't say out loud, listen to how the watch ticks, not just the time." I held my breath and pressed 3 points on the back, matching the code to the old safe in his study. A soft click. The back popped open. Inside was a narrow compartment, just big enough for a small black USB drive and a folded note. My hand trembled as I pulled them out. The letter was in his unmistakable handwriting. If you're reading this, things may be beyond control, but I've prepared. This USB contains copies of all financial records, private medical evaluations, recordings, and a lead. The person you need. Richard Donovan. Number and address below, trust me. I've planned ahead. They won't win. With love, Walter. I sat frozen for nearly 10 minutes. My heart raced, then slowed. The night faded into a soft haze and something stirred inside my chest. Something I thought was dead. Hope. The next morning, I walked into a small print shop near the motel. I rented a computer by the hour and plugged in the USB drive. A folder popped up on the screen. Its name, Nora_lockbox. Inside were dozens of files. Some were audio recordings, others scanned documents. One folder was password protected. I tried his birth date. His wedding anniversary. Still wrong. Then I typed the 4 numbers engraved on the pocket watch, digits I had always assumed were just serial numbers. Click, the folder unlocked. I held my breath as the list of files appeared. Audio file, Gregory_Parks_briefing, briefing on document, medical evaluation, cleared, PF, document, emergency fund, offshore accounts, $2 million. ISIF. I clicked on the audio file. Gregory's voice played through the speakers, measured, crisp, and cold. We need to make sure Nora has no access to any of the documents. I'll contact Mr. Walter's former physician to arrange a suitable mental evaluation. We just need to raise enough doubt in court. I bit my lip hard. No more guessing. They hadn't just planned to steal, they had been plotting since before he died. I dialed the number from the letter. A calm male voice answered. Donovan speaking. Are you Richard Donovan? This is Nora Sanderson, Walter's granddaughter. The silence lasted a few seconds. Then he answered, his voice slow and steady. You finally called. I've been waiting for this call for nearly a year. Where are you? That evening, he picked me up at a deserted gas station in Ventura, where he used to meet my grandfather each month to audit the emergency funds. Richard Donovan was a man in his 60s, simply dressed, but with piercing eyes that were hard to forget. He took me to a farmhouse on the outskirts of Carpinteria where he lived in quiet seclusion after retirement. "Walter didn't trust anyone in his family except you," he said while making tea. "And he planned for everything. Plan B, C, all the way to Z. That USB was only the beginning. Over the next 3 days, we worked nonstop. Richard contacted 2 of my grandfather's former associates. One was a legal expert who had revised special clauses in Blue Horizon's bylaws, and the other was his private doctor, who had personally monitored his condition until his final days. All of them confirmed Walter was fully lucid, made deliberate decisions, and left behind complete documentation to prove it. More importantly, an emergency account at a Swiss bank, opened 3 years ago in the name of Nora Sanderson, held over $2 million. It was a fund created in case Nora is ever cornered by her family. I asked Richard, "Why do you trust me this much?" He looked at me, unsmiling. "Because Walter trusted you. And Walter didn't place trust lightly." That night, I replayed Gregory's audio again. In that quiet farmhouse, as the pieces started falling into place, I knew. I had the truth. I had the resources. 7 o'clock in the morning, just another Monday for most people, but for me, it was the start of my counterattack. At the oak dining table in Richard Donovan's home, I sat across from 3 people. Benjamin Ward, an estate litigation attorney who worked with my grandfather during the 2017 Blue Horizon restructure. Marcus Hale, a private investigator Richard trusted implicitly. And Margaret Lang, a retired senior financial advisor from the company who left early due to principled disagreements with current leadership. Specifically, my father. "We have enough evidence to file immediately," Benjamin began, his voice firm. "I've prepared charges for falsifying legal documents, asset misappropriation, financial fraud, and obstruction of will execution." I kept my eyes on the thick folder in front of me of evidence Marcus had gathered in just 2 weeks and gave a single deliberate breath. That was my answer. Photos of Claire entering the Bellagio casino at 2 a.m., credit card receipts showing bets totaling over $120,000, video of my father leaving a bank with document folders on the same day the court ordered a freeze on disputed assets. "And that's not all," Marcus added, sliding another file toward me. "We found an internal recording from last month where Gregory Parks instructs a junior staffer to cancel the storage contract for the company's old accounting records." "Destroying evidence," Margaret breathed. "That's a serious violation of corporate ethics board regulations." "Which is why I say we include Gregory," Benjamin continued. "As the acting legal counsel, his misconduct is even more severe, violating state-level professional ethics." I placed my hand on the table and said steadily, "We do it all. Not just file the suit. We go public." With Benjamin's team, I reached out to 3 major financial outlets: the Capital Tribune, West Coast Ledger, and Ethics Weekly. In my messages to their editors, I used no angry tone, no threats. I sent evidence, facts, truth, and a single note. "I am the legal heir of Walter Sanderson. My family used influence to rob me of that right. This is the truth. The public deserves to know the rest." 3 days later, West Coast Ledger ran the first story. Was Walter Sanderson's legacy hijacked? Internal probe uncovers alarming financial violations. The article featured one carefully chosen photo of me. Strong, composed, not a victim. Then came Ethics Weekly, diving into Claire's gambling debts, quoting corporate statements misused to cover her personal losses. By the time the Capital Tribune interviewed a former Blue Horizon employee who'd been forced out for refusing to sign revised financial reports, the tide began to turn. Meanwhile, our official lawsuit was filed with the Los Angeles Superior Court. Benjamin led the legal team himself. The complaint ran over 30 pages and included the USB files, the doctor's written verification, and the audio of Gregory plotting the fake mental evaluation. On the other side, my parents, Claire and Gregory, there was nothing. No press conference, no rebuttal, just a quote in a tabloid where my mother said, "Nora is hurting and confused. We've always loved her." I let the silence do its work. They were scrambling behind closed doors, and I had no intention of offering them a stage to rewrite the narrative. 1 week later, Blue Horizon launched an internal investigation into leadership misconduct. 2 board members resigned. An emergency financial review was held. Without William Sanderson. His name started disappearing from official corporate posts. That night, I sat alone in Richard's temporary home office, staring at the whiteboard lined with timelines, names, and red strings. Every knot, every web, finally visible. I wasn't just reclaiming an inheritance. I was dismantling a system they used to control everything. On the morning of the hearing, I stepped out of Benjamin's car in front of Los Angeles Superior Court, gripping a black leather briefcase holding our final documents. Reporters lined the walkway. Flashbulbs went off. I didn't flinch. Once, they threw me out of my home like a squatter. And today, I returned as the rightful heir. My parents arrived later, along with Gregory and Claire. The 4 of them rushed through the door, avoiding the public eye. Gregory whispered something into my father's ear, while my mother wore sunglasses that covered half her face. Inside the courtroom, Judge Monica Whitford, renowned for her fairness and sharpness, sat firmly on the bench. After confirming all parties were present, she spoke clearly. The Sanderson case will be conducted under expedited procedures due to its particular nature and the preliminary verification of evidence. Each party will have a chance to present, but let me be clear, this is not a stage. Everything will proceed based on facts, the law, and professional ethics. Benjamin began presenting the compiled evidence, from financial records to unusual expenditures, audio recordings of Gregory directing medical manipulation, and especially the forged letter created after my grandfather passed away. Then he turned to me and asked, "Nora, do you have any proof that your grandfather's final wish was to leave everything to you?" I looked at the judge and handed the court clerk a USB drive. A large screen descended. On it appeared my grandfather, Walter. He was wearing a gray suit, sitting in the library. Warm light casting over his silver hair and commanding eyes. His voice was deep, steady, each word carefully spoken. "I, Walter Sanderson, am of sound mind as I record this testament. I leave all executive shares and assets to my granddaughter, Nora Sanderson, for her integrity, leadership, and dignity. This is not favoritism. This is a decision made with reason and responsibility." He paused, took a deep breath, then continued. "I know. After I'm gone, there may be those who challenge this. That is why I consent to having my personal physician conduct a cognitive evaluation immediately after this video." The video transitioned to him answering a series of questions from the doctor, clear, coherent, with no signs of memory loss. Then came the witness testimony. Peterson, my grandfather's longtime housekeeper, stepped up to the stand, dressed in an old but tidy suit. His voice was gravelly but firm. "I saw Mr. William Sanderson, the master of the house, drag Miss Nora out by the hair and throw her down the steps. No one intervened. I'm ashamed I stayed silent for so long." Peterson choked up. Next were the former financial officer, my grandfather's physician, and finally Margaret, who confirmed that Gregory had asked her to sign a falsified medical report. She refused and was forced to resign. My parents' side had almost no rebuttal. Gregory offered vague denials, while Claire sat silent, clenching her dress, unable to meet my eyes. After hearing everything, Judge Whitford left the chambers for nearly an hour. When she returned, her gaze had changed, cold and resolute. Based on the evidence presented, the court finds Mr. Walter Sanderson was fully lucid when executing the will. The video holds legal validity and is properly certified. The original will shall be reinstated in full. She paused for a beat, then added, Under California state law and preliminary investigative findings, this court refers the records of William Sanderson, Eleanor Sanderson, Claire Sanderson, and Gregory Parks to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges, including document forgery, obstruction of justice, and asset misappropriation. The courtroom fell completely silent. Miss Nora Sanderson's estate shall be restored in full, including all real property, shares, and related assets. Frozen accounts shall be reopened within 7 days. I showed no smile, shed no tears, only let my breath slow, like my body was finally learning how to unclench after surviving a silent war. 3 days after the verdict, I received a call from the Sanderson family's new attorney. My clients wish to renegotiate, the representative said in a voice laced with calculation masked by courtesy. They're willing to forego an appeal if you allow them to keep the estate for a bit longer. At least, until they find alternative housing. I looked out the window where the late afternoon sun fell across the orange trees behind Richard's house. I remembered being shoved out of that very home in the rain, hair soaked, numb from humiliation. No, I replied, my voice steady. As per the will, they have 10 days to collect personal belongings. I'm not taking anything more from them, but they will not keep anything that belongs to my grandfather. You might want to reconsider. I've thought enough. I cut him off, then hung up. A week later, I received a handwritten letter, no sender name. Just to Nora, in a soft script I immediately recognized. Claire. Nora, I don't expect this letter to change your mind. I'm writing simply to say what I've never dared to. I've been jealous of you for a long time. You received the recognition I always craved, not from our parents, but from Grandpa. You never tried to be the perfect daughter. You just lived as yourself. But that's exactly why he trusted you more than anyone else in this family. At first, I thought I could keep everything by following their orders, but over time, I realized I was just a pawn. When I was drowning in gambling debt, they weren't angry. They saw opportunity. They told me if I played along, everything would be fixed. I chose the easy path and lost everything. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But if one day you agree to meet, just to talk, not about money or the inheritance, I'm willing to listen. Oh, and one more thing. I'm returning this. You'll understand why it matters. Claire. Inside the envelope was a small velvet box. I opened it and froze. A pair of gold cufflinks engraved with my grandfather's name. The ones he always wore on important occasions. The same pair my father took when clearing out the house and sold to a pawn shop. Claire had tracked them down and bought them back. I called Benjamin to confirm there were no legal strings attached to the letter. Then I typed a short message and sent it to the email address Claire had written at the bottom. I agree to meet, but not at the estate. Let's meet at Bell's Garden Cafe, 3 p.m. this Thursday. That afternoon, I arrived 10 minutes early. I chose a quiet corner, ordered an Earl Grey tea, and watched the entrance. When Claire walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. No heavy makeup, no designer bag, no expensive coat. Just a tired-looking woman, a little timid, slightly out of place. "Thank you for coming," she said as she sat down. We talked for nearly an hour. Claire spoke about her therapy sessions, her efforts to pay off debts by working as an accountant for a small office in Burbank, and how she would wake up some nights from dreams of my grandfather standing in the library, looking at her with disappointment. I didn't comfort her. When we parted, I only said one thing. I don't know what the future holds, but if you truly want to start over, you'll need to begin with kindness. Not to prove anything to me, but to yourself. I returned to the estate one last time on a fall morning, when maple leaves had turned the driveway crimson. No one was home. No more shouting, control, or judgmental glances like before. Only old walls and memories remained. I walked through the rooms, checking every detail as if I were saying goodbye to a part of my life. Before I left, I paused in the library, where my grandfather used to read every morning, and gently placed the other cufflink on the desk. A silent farewell. 3 weeks later, the estate was sold. I used part of the money to establish the Thomas Montgomery Scholarship Fund, named after my grandfather, to support business students from underprivileged backgrounds, with a clear ethical commitment to their future careers. Not everyone gets the chances I did, but if I can pass on even a fraction of the trust my grandfather placed in me, then that's how his legacy will live on in this world. The majority of the remaining assets went to organizations that support women facing domestic violence. I'll never forget the feeling of being dragged out of a house in the rain, with nowhere to go and no one to stand up for me. I can't save everyone, but maybe I can be a small umbrella for someone trembling in the rain, just as I once was. I chose to leave California and start fresh in Boston. The city is colder, but the quiet, the salty air mixed with the scent of old books in cozy cafes gave me a feeling I once believed I didn't deserve. Peace. I rented a simple attic apartment in Beacon Hill with a balcony overlooking the park, where every morning I can make tea and read without anyone monitoring or interrupting me. And at a sustainability and education conference, where I was invited to speak about the Montgomery Fund, I met Jordan. He's an environmental engineer, coordinating renewable energy projects for low-income communities. We didn't start with sparks, but with a long conversation about professional ethics and the line between ideals and reality. I used to fear relationships, afraid I'd be controlled again, forced to live by someone else's expectations. But Jordan didn't offer grand promises. He asked if I preferred living near rivers or mountains. He didn't intrude on my schedule or try to prove anything. What I appreciate most is that he never tried to fix me. He simply respected what I'd been through. On my 32nd birthday, I didn't throw a party. I invited a few new friends, a few former scholarship recipients, and hosted a small talk on the topic. Freedom doesn't come from victory. It comes from how you choose to live after you've stood back up. After the talk, when most people had left, I walked back into the room, turned on the soft lights, and sat quietly among the empty chairs. I was in a quiet room, but I didn't feel small. I used to be the unworthy daughter, the mentally unstable one, the one cut out of the family. But now, I don't have to prove anything to anyone. Not everyone gets to overturn a will. Not everyone finds justice. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. A person's worth isn't in an inheritance. It's in how they rise from ruin, and what they build with their own hands afterward. Nora's story is not just a journey for justice. It's a profound reminder that truth and dignity can't be denied forever. In a world full of schemes and deceit, Nora stood firm with ethics, intellect, and resolve. She didn't just win a legal battle. She rebuilt a life of value, freedom, and peace. That is the greatest legacy anyone ever cast out, can choose to create for themselves. What do you think of Nora's decision? Should she completely forgive her family, or uphold the boundaries she fought so hard to set? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories to come.